I'm going to tell you a story about the time my neighbour's car burst into flames and we turned it into a short film. Now, saying that out loud, I realised just how, clickbaity and concerning the headline to that story sounds. So I just wanted to start by stressing that nobody was injured or hurt or anywhere near the car in the story I'm about to share. So we just finished making a short film called Street Fox, and it was one of the first times we'd really come together as a group and made something that we were proud of. And we weren't quite sure where to go next. And I sometimes find this thing that when you're creating, if you're very busy, it's quite difficult to have new ideas. And quite often you need to rest and just take some time out to just live life and absorb life to then be able to create new things. And during this time, two things happened that I guess really informed this film and I guess really set the scene for this story. Where I was living at the time was, shall we just say, not the nicest area. And one evening I was just sat in my room and at about midnight I hear all this commotion outside, and essentially what's happening is some drug dealers are confronting a guy over, I guess, an unsettled debt or something. And what happened is the guy had managed to lock himself in his car, and these two guys were basically hammering on the window, like punching the window, kicking the car, spitting at the car, basically saying, and I'm gonna not use the language that they used here, but they were essentially saying, you have 2 days, if you don't give us back our money, you have no idea what we're capable of. And of course, I'm looking out the window thinking, is this gonna escalate? Am I gonna, like, what, this is crazy, this is happening. And thankfully the guys left and the guy in his car drove off. Hopefully things worked out okay for him, but a couple of days passed and I thought nothing of it. And I'm playing a video game in the same room and I'm waiting for my brother to come over, and as I'm playing this game, I've just got this new sound bar and I'm just hearing all these explosions going off. I'm thinking, wow, this sound bar is really good. Like, you can really feel the punch of these explosions. At which point my brother literally comes bursting in the door and he says, Scott, you've got to look outside. You're not going to believe this. There is a car on fire. And at first I was just confused. I was like, what are you talking about? There's a car on fire. And he said, literally up the road, as he'd been driving in, he'd seen a car basically just burst into flames. So I run outside, we go up the road a bit to where he's seen this, and he's not wrong. There is a car just fully on fire in front of us. And thankfully, nobody was in the car, nobody was near the car, and whilst obviously it was getting very concerning, the fire department had been called and the neighbours that were onlooking were at a very safe distance. A few people did walk past, you know, like there was a group of students, I think, or teenagers, and they basically were just filming it and putting it on Snapchat and stuff, because obviously it's not every day that you just see a car in the middle of the street on fire. As I knew it was an isolated incident, I knew there was nobody in harm's way, and I knew that the authorities were on the way to deal with it, I decided, people are filming it on their phone, why don't I capture some good quality video of it? So I went back inside, I got my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, and I went outside and I basically just started shooting high quality raw footage in 4K of this fire, because I just thought this is quite a big event, it'd be good to capture it and also just to show it to my neighbours and stuff like that. And eventually you see the fire engine pulling up, the firefighters getting out and putting out the fire. So they safely put the fire out and everything was solved. Unfortunately, the neighbour's fence was damaged and the insurance company had to replace it. But aside from that, all the insurance ended up paying out. It was all kind of covered. Everything was fine in the end. Now, at the time, the police did ask the onlookers if they had seen anything. And I did disclose the story that I'd seen with the two men confronting the man in a car. And I said, I don't know if it's related, but this is something that I saw. And, you know, it happened in a similar area. Now, it was subsequently investigated and the verdict was that this was an electrical fault in the car and the two instances were actually completely unrelated, and so nothing more was ever thought of. But I sat there and I thought, even if the two weren't related, that's quite a interesting story there. And I started thinking about it more and more, and in that period of rest, my subconscious started working and started meshing the ideas together, and I came up with the idea of, well, why don't we just make our next short film about this, about two dealers who confront a guy, give him a couple of days to get some money to pay his debt, and if he can't, his car goes on fire. And then I thought about it even more and I thought, well, I filmed the car on fire. And I had in the back of my mind when I was filming that I might use that footage for something. I thought, assuming this is resolved safely and there's no criminal activity involved, then, you know, this happened on a public road. Other people were just filming it and putting it on Instagram. If I were to make a short film, put it on YouTube, it's the same mechanism, but just done in a more kind of focused and narrative way. And I mentioned the idea to my brother. He was a fan of it, and so that's exactly what we did. We decided to write this short film based around this footage that we had. So we thought, okay, well, we know what the end point is, which is this car on flames and the fire brigade showing up and putting out the fire. And I'd witnessed the drug deal, so I started by almost word for word writing down from my diary account the dialogue of the car scene, which in the final film ended up being pretty much bang on what I saw actually happening. Everything in between the drug confrontation and the car on fire had to be imagined. And so I came up with this outline for these two characters who might get into this situation. What kind of person might fail to pay? Why do they fail to pay? And I wrote this short story outline about these two guys who are just really cocky and arrogant and just fail to see the consequences of their actions, who owe money to this dealer, try and get the money to pay it, but subsequently just end up buying more drugs with the money they raise, and the car just goes up into this blaze because they just assume there won't be consequences. I sent my typed out story outline to my brother, Thomas, who's a screenwriter, and he wrote it out into a script. He wrote dialogue for all the characters. He tightened everything up and just made it kind of more coherent and actually put it into a screenplay that could be read by actors. We then went on to make this short film, and whilst technically there's a lot of things that I would do very differently today, cinematography wise, acting wise, things like this, I actually am really proud of how the film turned out, and I watch it from time to time just to reflect and to kind of measure it against where we're progressing, and I'm really proud of really what we achieved with this film. We drafted in friends as actors, and I pulled a favour to film in a pub for free, and we basically spent, I think it was probably about 4 days shooting this film, and we had an absolute blast doing it. Now, when it came to the scene of the car on fire, the biggest challenge was how we would connect the two, because by this point when we were shooting, the car had been on fire 6 months ago, and all of a sudden here we are making a film. Although we had the same camera and I knew what the same settings were on the camera, we had to find a way of linking the two up and making it believable. Now, one of the ways we did this is by filming a sequence where the two dealers actually set the car alight. Now, of course, we weren't going to set the car on fire, but we did park a car that was an exact match to the one that had burnt, that a friend kindly lent us, in the same spot. We put some water on it and we basically pretended to set it on fire. And then using visual effects, I basically composited fire into the shot, just enough to make it sellable and believable that this car has just been lit on fire, and then I panned to them running away. As a side note, if anyone's interested in how I did this, I can do a visual effects tutorial. Just let me know in the comments, and if there's any interest, I'm happy to do that. Now, the next thing for us to get was a shot of the characters reacting to the car in flames. And to do that was a little bit tricky, because whilst I knew the same camera settings and we went back to the same location because I was no longer living there at that point, we essentially had to match the lighting. So although there's obviously better ways of doing this, because we were just shooting in the street with just essentially a tiny skeleton crew of friends, we basically bought these on Amazon. So this light here, we had I think 2 or 3 of these, is basically mimics firelight, and so we basically had loads of these hung up in front of the characters just to be casting that light of the flames. And then for the bit where the fire engine came up, we timed it, and essentially we just got this, which makes a good noise, but essentially just would put the blue light on the characters. And so we ended up having someone holding these out in front, and so we had a reaction shot where we acted as if we were watching the car on fire and then the fire truck pulling up, and we basically had the lights so that once we graded it the same as the other footage and shot it with the same lens and everything, it would splice together really well, and just that practical light would just trick the viewer into believing that we're actually there at the same time. Another scene that obviously was fun to shoot was the drug dealer confrontation, and for that we had some really great friends. We had my friend Harry, who played like the muscle, and our friend Adam as well, who we'd collaborated with in his band when we were doing music in the past. But, you know, chatting to him, he just had such an openness, and we said, do you fancy playing this character? And he was up for it, and so we essentially had him play the part, and he did a fantastic job. He came across really threatening, and it's funny because obviously in real life he's such a lovely guy, but on screen you really do fear him. So great job to Adam. And yeah, we again got lucky with that. We shot in a car park where the shop just gave us permission once they shut to film there. Now I was actually quite pleased with the lighting of that scene, and that was sheer luck. I wish I could say that we had a director of photography on that film and we really, you know, spent ages working it out and diffusing lights and adding negative fill and all these different things. But at that time, we didn't have the means to do that and we didn't have the contacts to do that. And so we just got very lucky by parking the car in a spot where there was some very good natural lighting and the street lamps hit at the perfect places where we were lit really well in the car and Adam and Harry were lit really well too. So we got all the footage together, we edited it. It was quite a tedious editing process because syncing up the audio and stuff was a bit of a hassle, and we had a few scenes that hadn't worked out exactly how we wanted. But in the end, we got something we were really proud of and that kind of coherently told the story we wanted to tell and was true to the vision we'd had. And whilst technically speaking, obviously it's not shot as well as some of the stuff that we're now producing, we learned a great deal and I think it really does hold up. So if anyone has any interest in seeing the final product of how we merge these two together in its full context, then the first link in the description will be to the film here on my YouTube channel. So what's to gain from telling this story? What's the point of making this video? Now, I've been establishing this message over the past couple of videos that I've made on this channel, and that is this message of using what you have now, and instead of waiting for better equipment or waiting for better crews or actors or whatever it is that is preventing you from achieving your creative dreams, find a way of doing what you can now with what you have. Now, of course, it may not be the dream that you have in mind, but if you just start, honestly, starting is the hardest thing, because as soon as you start, you just start in motion and you do something and then you don't like it. And so you try again, you try again, you try again. And it's that progress that takes you to the place where then you're able to fulfill the dreams that you have and the creative visions that you have. So that's really what I'm trying to encourage, is that openness to life and to keeping your eyes open to opportunity, and also to check in with yourself and to know what stirs something in you. Because in this case, there were two things about this that really emotionally moved me. The first thing was the fear and the adrenaline of the confrontation of these two dealers and the concern for the guy in the situation. The second thing was the concern of the car fire, the adrenaline of the car fire, and also then the kind of emotions that I felt seeing the fire be put out and seeing this sight, just the image of it was very moving to me. And so watching back the footage I took of the firefighters, the image just moved me in a way that I thought was really powerful. And so in the context of a film, I knew then I had these points of, okay, how can I expand and explore the emotional response I had to these things? And I lastly just want to end this video by stressing that I'm absolutely, under no circumstances, advising or telling you to go out and film anything on fire, to film anything dangerous. I think that whilst I'm very passionate about art and creation, I don't think you should be putting yourself in dangerous situations to get it. It's also worth noting that I shot this on like a 70mm lens, so we were far away from this when this was happening. And so I encourage anyone watching this video to just make a start. Look around in your life, and even if it's just writing short stories or writing script outlines based on things that you see that provoke something in you, that is so valuable. And that's something that, you know, I sometimes will write something down years ago and then suddenly I'm looking for a new idea and it will just come back to me and I'll revisit that note and I think, that thing I saw or that thing that happened in my life now is this thing that I can explore and I can create something new out of that can be interesting to other people. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'm going to try and upload videos as frequently as I can. We've been in production recently. I've been directing something and it's been one of the biggest undertakings I guess we've done creatively. We had a much bigger crew on this one and it's been a lot. It's been a great fulfilling experience and I'm really excited to share the final result and the stories of making it when we're at that point. But it's just meant that it's much harder at the moment to film YouTube videos, so I'm going to be uploading as and when I can. But in the meantime, if you want to check out the short film, it's called Like Dreamers Do. It's in the description and I'd love to know what you think.